First of all, thanks you all for coming. I know it's late on the last day of the show, but obviously this is a topic of interest for some people, and we're glad you're here. The topic is transform your project-based business with more seamless business solutions. So again, basically it's the project-based world, and we'll talk about some of those things and some of the key industry issues that are going on. My name's Carr Phillips. I'm with Microsoft. For the record, just full disclosure, I've been at Microsoft 10 weeks. So new to the organization. I do know the space quite well. I was at SAP for 10 years, where I was the global lead for the service industries there. Prior to that, I was at PeopleSoft doing the same thing, and then before that, I was in industry. I was a partner at KPMG, and then before that, I was at a consulting firm for about 10 years. So I have a long history of working in the consulting world and either working in the industry itself or providing services and solutions to that particular industry. So just to sort of set the context of what we want to talk about today, sort of what does service industries mean, and how do we, Microsoft, define that for you guys? Basically, we're looking at pulling together a couple of different what would be called industries outside of Microsoft. We're talking about professional services firms. This includes the consulting, audit, and tax firms, IT service firms, legal firms, managed services firms, the whole gamut of professional services. Next to that, we have the A&C firms, the architecture, engineering, and construction companies. So we're looking at everything from the home builders to the contractors to the subcontractors to the ETO vendors, the engineering firms, whether or not they're doing the big stuff or the repetitive stuff, the entire construction world. And then finally, communications and media, sort of a tack on. What we're looking at there is advertising firms, broadcasting firms, cable companies. And again, how do we sort of tie this all together? We're really looking at things that are project-based primarily. They tend to be talent-driven, so these are very people-intensive organizations. The number one asset for a professional services firm is its people, and trying to make sure that understanding what those people are and making sure they're deployed properly is the number one process that we're looking at. And then finally, we're talking about intellectual capital-intensive organizations, where again those people assets are the primary thing that we're looking at. The knowledge that they have, the relationships they have with their clients, the knowledge they have of the products and how to do the implementations and the delivery of those services is important what they're looking at doing. So before I get started, there were a couple things I wanted to talk about. There are a number of mega trends that are going on in the sort of world in general. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about those, but I wanted to bring them into context of what they mean for us here in the service industry. So the first one I wanted to talk about was something called everything as a service. Has anybody heard about that one? It's a buzzword that, if you Bing it or Google it, you'll see it out there, but is it something that people have seen at all? No? So I guess not on that one. But everything as a service. The idea here is that whether or not you're in the product world, things are being servitized. And if you're in the service world, it's being productized. And by that, we mean things like examples. The first one is General Electric. Historically, the airplane engine division built airplane engines, and they sold it as a product. Today, what they're looking at is they don't actually sell it as a product, they sell it as a managed service, right? It's how much flight hour uptime is available for that particular engine, and you pay basically a subscription model for having that thing run all the time. It's not a purchase, and then it has to be maintained. It's actually an entire service contract. So for this particular organization, if you're just being a product company, where you're building something and delivering it to the customer and you're done, it's not the world. You have to make sure that it's delivering the performance as promised for a certain amount of time, whether or not it's months, years, or even longer than that. And that how do we go about maintaining that and servicing that and providing the service over time? Another example of how this world is changing in sort of the everything as a service world is Service Corp. Now, Service Corp is, they own, what they do is they provide virtual office space. So historically, if you were a company starting out, you needed to rent space. We've all heard the Apple story, they started in a garage, or HP story, they started in a garage. Apple was something similar to that. Today, if you're living in Silicon Valley, you don't do it that way. What you do is you go to a company like Service Corp, and you get, you can rent out, as much office space as you need. You get an office, and with that, not just the space, but the entire infrastructure. Phone, administrative, network, printing. Basically, you can just a stand-up office, a pop-up office as they call it, allow you to get, I need 10 offices this week. I need 20 more next week. I need 50 more the next week. All of a sudden, I don't have to worry about all of the different pieces of that. All I do is I just need, as I need them, just be able to add more and more onto the equation. And so that's really, I mean, from a management standpoint, it's like, how do I do that? It's not like I'm buying the building and filling it. It's like I actually have to manage it from a rental standpoint every single day, trying to make sure I'm doing that. And then the last one is a slightly different example, but again, Verizon is your telecommunications, provides mobile service, landline service, but at the same time, they have this huge, network, wireless and internet capabilities that they're trying to figure out how to, sell more of it. And one of the things they're doing is they are going into utility companies and providing smart meter readers. So you can actually then provide the readers at your house, at your business, in terms of how much utility you're using, and they're using their network to be able to pull all the huge amounts of data from each one individual residence or business, bring it back, organize it, bill it, and submit the summaries to the utility companies for them. Think of it as an outsourced service. As a utility, maybe it's not a core function for you. Maybe you're a small organization, you're a small utility in a remote area. You're not one of the larger ones that obviously needs to do this themselves. And so these guys, you can go to Verizon, they can provide this service, and you don't have to do any of it for it. So again, the idea here is that as the world is going, is we're no longer living in a product world or a service world, but the worlds are really merging. And so everything we're looking at could potentially be everything as a service. And then the final example that I didn't put up here, but I wanted to talk to you guys about, is obviously a world that we all care about is software. It started out as it was software, came on a CD, came packaged, you brought it in, you loaded the disks, and you're done. And today, a lot of software is delivered as a service, SaaS related. And the benefit there is that you as a consumer, all you have to do is turn it on. As much as you need, and the functionality you need gets turned on and off, and it's immediately accessible, and it's just you pay whatever the monthly fee is per person per month for whenever you need it. So the ultimate function, as it comes back to our industry specifically, is around the SaaS story. So I think this is a trend that we're going to continue to see, and it's going to continue to impact what we're doing and how we're doing it. So the second trend I wanted to look at was about business models. Again, in a current state or the older state, we're looking at things around, I was a professional services firm. I did everything as T&E. I built, I billed a customer for all the time I spent, all the expenses I incurred, and at the end of the day, we're done. It's like, and I added my 10% on top, made a nice profit, we're all done, all right? Well, the world isn't like that anymore, right? We can't, they're having fixed fee contracts, we're doing managed services, we're doing a combination of them, we're doing some subscription stuff, some of it's custom, some of it's standard, whatever. The models are getting very complicated. And so, as we start to blend these different things, how do we support that from a process standpoint? How do we support it from a system standpoint and from a personnel standpoint? Do we have the right people? And in this specific example here, what I'm talking about is how the professional services or the project-based world, field services, and customer support in a lot of ways are merging. A lot of organizations, if you're the project world is, I'm doing an installation. But, say you're a network assets, telecommunications company doing network assets, right? I have a huge set of, network assets that I have to install. That's a project service. I need to be able to set up the project, do project plans, keep track of the amount of time it takes to do that. Did I do it on budget, on time? And that's the first step. But then the next step is, there's the whole thing about customer support. I have a problem. There's a break-fix issue that's come up, or it's not working properly, or I'm having an issue. That then ties into I need a field person to go out there and look at it. And so the field service. So again, we're having these three processes that are really becoming quite tightly integrated. And the challenge, of course, is that because they've come together, they need to work together. And right now, they are three separate activities, three separate systems. And we're having what we as software vendors have done is forced partners and or customers with their partners to sort of figure out ways to integrate that. And the reality is, I think this is going to change. I think what we're going to see is the world of these things, of these particular applications, but I think applications in general have to do a better job of integrating across an entire business process. And that's what we want to get to, is really just talking about what is the true business process you have for your industry, for your role, and understanding what that is so that we can just, actually put together the solution that includes a lot of different products. In this case right now, people are buying project systems, they're buying customer support, they're buying field service. But then again, that's not what you guys need. What you guys need is the ability to pull all that together. And that's one of the things I think we're going to start to see more of as well. The third thing I wanted to talk about is sort of third blending thing that I wanted to talk about was millennials. Is millennials, I'm going to try again to see if I can entertain or engage the audience here, millennials, is millennials a discussion within your organization in terms of how they're coming in and how they're changing the way you guys are operating? Anybody? I've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got a couple. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about, well, step back. One is, with these industries that we're talking about, people are obviously the core asset. And because there's so many people in consulting organizations, and each one of them is a operations person. 95% of a consulting organization is an operations person. They are out there selling the work and delivering the service, right? And so it's critical what they do. As you bring these millennials into the organization, they are changing the way that you're not operating your business, but also how you're interacting with clients. And so this is kind of put together a couple different things. But on the left side, what I really wanted to show with the thing on the left is, we've got, men and women, young people, in your organization in large numbers, right? 2 is they are out there in the world. So you need to be able to be where they are and act and work with the way they work. They work differently than other people. They want access to information differently, right? We're all comfortable with email. We became comfortable with email. The next generation that's come back through is now looking at instant messaging and Skype and those kinds of things. My 15-year-old daughter, she's like, email? What's that? I mean, what is email? I mean, in another 10 years, the people that are coming out of college are not going to be even using email. They're going to be using Yammer. They're going to be using Yik Yak or Kik or any of these other, WhatsApp. They're going to be using those kinds of things. And we have to be able to figure out how to bring those technologies into the business processes that we're looking to do and figure out how they can tie into this, right? An example here of how a millennial might change your business process. If you've got a consulting firm and you've got a business development manager who's headed off to a client site and sitting in the cab and is realizing, first of all, they haven't done the prep work because they're doing it on the fly. And they're pulling up their phone and they want to be able to see everything they want about that client right now. How hard would that be in today's current environment? Can you see, if you on your phone, in real time, all of the projects you've ever done with that client? What were the billings? Have the invoices all been paid? Who worked on those projects? What were the projects generally about? What opportunities are you currently working with that organization? And sort of get that 360-degree view. It's kind of a buzzword, 360-degree view. But the reality is, do you know what's going on with that client as you go in to talk to them? If you're going in to talk to them about a new opportunity, do you know about any issues with existing projects that are being flagged? And are you aware of them, right? So again, getting that information on a phone, on a tablet, in a taxi cab, on the way to the client is a different way of how people are operating. And we have to be able to make visible all of the information within your ERP system or your project-based system available to them. And can we do that today? And that's the way we do it. And again, they want to be able to do it everywhere. So not just in the office, not just at the client site, in the taxi, at the client site, in a hotel, wherever it is. The notion here with the millennials is not work-life balance, but work-life blending, right? Because they're working at night, on the weekends, on the holiday. It doesn't matter. They're sort of blending it in and moving it all around. And so we have to be able to work with them and do that. So there's an impact for what millennials are going to do in terms of how we run our business and how we work with clients. So that means that our processes are going to change and the technologies that support that are going to change.
Isn't there something that we need to marry that in with the workforce that's there already that have their emails printed out by their PAs and left on their desks and stuff? We need to find some way that pace of change isn't too fast for the company, right? And that's going to be difficult for us.
So let me repeat the question so the recorder can get it. So the question was asked is, yes, this is happening, but we also have to keep in mind that the existing communication platforms that we're currently using still need to be there, like email, because our existing workforce is using those and still needs those and relies on those. And the answer is yes. We're not looking at getting rid of email necessarily, but we need to be able to add these new things, whether or not it's a Yammer or Kik or any of these other kinds of things. But we need to have both. Exactly. Gold star to the person in the front row. And he's not from Microsoft, so he's not a plant. So any of the rest of you want to challenge him with your questions or comments, you're welcome to do that too. So the fourth and final area I wanted to talk about was this thing called Internet of Things. I don't know who came up with this term. I'm not sure what it really meant at first, but I think that as a people, we're slowly getting the ideas. Enterprise, the Internet of Things really means that every device is somehow connected, right? Everything, and we're seeing images here, cars and planes and devices and medical devices, and these things are all coming together somehow. Essentially, I was at a startup in 1996, and they were doing, sort of smart appliances. It was way before its time. This has become real now, right? And we're now seeing this in real life, where these, whether or not it's the smart car or the intelligent smart cities, we're now seeing this come to reality. That this notion of everything can have everything. There's data associated with every device that's out there, and we need to collect up this data. The question is, first of all, the data gets generated. We have to collect the data, and then what are we going to do with it? And how can we use that to change behavior? Specifically, as that relates to what we're doing in the service industries. I think if you guys did everybody see Scott's presentation yesterday? This is one you all should raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Nodding, we're not asleep yet. So Scott talked about this particular example. This is Caterpillar, right? So what Caterpillar is doing, so they're a product company, but the reality is they have a very large leasing organization as well, right? And so they've got to be able to manage all of this very expensive capital equipment. They've got to make sure that they know where it is, they know it's performing well. And in order to do that, what they've done is they've added the whole Internet of Things to it, right? So that they can keep track of it. They don't have to send a technician out to monitor a piece of equipment in a remote location. The sensor on the device can provide that information to you. Right? And they went through a really great demo yesterday about not only how the Internet of Things works, but how a technician can be plugged into that with the Power app that they built, where they could actually go and do the inspection of the thing, take pictures, and add all the great sort of storyline with that. I think that this is relevant to us in terms of the rental space. We're talking about. But the other thing I also want to talk about, this isn't a single solution. It's not a single product that solves this problem, right? We're having to pull together a couple of different things. AX is providing all the financials and the back office piece associated with that. Cortana Analytics is providing all the analytic capabilities for us to be able to see where it is and predict when there's going to be failure and what's the optimal use of that asset and where we could do a better job of improving that. Power Apps is the ability for us to quickly, as a customer or even as a partner, to quickly build on-the-fly apps that can be used on a mobile device to be able to plug into these processes. And finally, the Azure IoT Suite, be able to then physically put those sensors on any device, anywhere, and be able to have the technology to support to bring that data back. So again, that story is a great story, and pulling together that solution is what we want to talk about. Another example here is operating the intelligent buildings, or smart cities, intelligent buildings. The marketing people have gone a little crazy on the titles here. But again, in our space, if you're a facilities management company and you're operating a building, if you're an owner-operator and you're managing the building, right? If you think about it, the things that you can Internet enable in that building to help you do a better job of managing it, whether or not we're talking about elevators, we're talking about the energy consumption, water consumption, whether or not we're talking, just the overall performance of that, how we're managing, cleaning services and the rental space. All of that comes together and sort of the different components to look at, how IoT becomes an important piece of how we in this industry can start to do a better job of managing our facilities on that. Another example here might be if you think about, again, back to everything as a service. And construction companies used to be I built the building and hand it off to somebody. Well, if you think about it, the building could be another way of it can be servitized as well. If you're an owner-operator, you build the building and then turn it over yourself to operate, you're having to manage that, the life cycle of that asset over the next 20 years. How do I not only, manage it in terms of an operations perspective that we just talked about here, but also from a revenue standpoint in terms of leasing and making sure that we're maximizing the revenue generation around that. So again, you can almost think of it, as a building as a service as well. And that particular example. So from your perspective, are these kinds of things, Internet of Things, the millennials, changing of business models, are these things happening in your guys' companies within your service industry companies?
So we've got it's an engineering company, and one of the rail practices are looking to use that kind of tracking on some of the components, on some of the rail components, to look at that maintenance schedule.
If I may. because it wasn't a question.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, so I guess we've got, we've got an example where it's an engineering company and there's a rail practice there. And I was chatting to a guy in the lift the other day as I was going up, and he was saying that they're doing some small experiments about tracking the rail components and looking at the maintenance type of lifestyle. And what does it mean for them as a business? Because previously they were just, we were just going in and doing projects, and they're thinking, okay, how does that change what we do with the client, etc. And then, so it's probably a few of those themes that you're talking about there, maybe the Internet of Things, and maybe the business models changing as well. Right. I think that's a small part, and I don't know how pervasive that is, but I think there are pockets of it happening around the business right now. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Thank you. I think that and another example, I think in this one, if I probably should go back here for the videotaping. But another example of how you might want to think of, how we think of this differently in terms of, construction companies. Think about, from a HoloLens standpoint. If I can create, augmented reality, if I can take the plans of what the building is, add in augmented reality and say, show people, outside of the design team, this is what it is designed to look like. Or more importantly, this is the proposed change you want. You want me to change this. This is what it's going to change, and be able to show them, in relative real time. Here's what it's going to look like, and have them walk through the scenario in terms of walking through the building or seeing what the building looks like from a 3D rendering and that kind of thing. And then tie that back to a Dynamics AX and looking at the cost perspective. Be able to say, okay, this is what it was going to cost. This is what the new cost is going to change the cost to be, whether or not it's adding or subtracting, most likely adding, of course. But again, how do we start to think about these things differently in terms of the technology that can come to bear to solve these problems? So a couple things. I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about Microsoft and sort of the transition that we're in. As again, I'm new to Microsoft. You guys have probably seen this slide. This was Satya's the big mission change and shift of what he's been talking about in the last 2+ years since he's been at Microsoft. Again, how do we empower people? We're cloud first, mobile first, and the most important thing, around these reinventing productivity. We're talking about building the intelligent cloud and creating more personal computing. Again, the focus is around, again, how do we identify business processes, put them, in an industry context, put them in the cloud, making sure they're mobile enabled for the world that's out there. And I think that I'm hoping that you guys have heard that. So is this something you've all heard before? You've been to more than one convergence, you've heard this story? Yes? No? I'm getting one yes. Thank you. Thank you for responding. Not the guy in the front row, but on that one. So again, it's a change. This is a change from the old Microsoft to what we're going now. So hopefully you've heard it. Hopefully you're seeing some reality around this. And I think that not only this is important for our customers to know, but our partners as well. We're going to have to change on how we're going to do this, how we're going to solve our joint customer problems, your problems, by being able to sort of look at this in a different way. So here's an example of how we might want to do that. So I picked professional services as a flow. This could be any of the verticals or sub-verticals in the service industries, whether or not we're talking construction, we're talking home building, we're talking ETO, whatever it's going to be. It doesn't matter. Again, the question is, what we need to do, working with you and working with our partners, is identify what is the core business process that you guys need to do to be successful in your organization. What are the things, what is it that's making you guys, successful? How are we helping you make your customers happy, right? And so step one is to understand that. And what Microsoft is looking to do is to be making sure that we have the subject matter expertise in your industries to be able to talk the business issues that you guys are dealing with, the process you're issuing, and the language you're talking about, right? And if we were having this discussion last year, we'd only have the two bubbles on your left, which is Dynamics AX and Dynamics CRM. This is, convergence. It was really about, this is only a dynamic show. The reality is, today's world is completely different. We are truly looking at how do we knit together solutions across the entire Microsoft stack, whether or not we're talking about Cortana Analytics or Field One or Office 365, Power BI, Azure Internet of Things and Power Apps, and many, many more. There's a lot of things out there that we have out there that come to bear to solve the problem. So how do we then look at, for instance, if we were to go through the steps of the process about accessing pipeline? Well, that sounds like a CRM solution. Well, yeah, it could be that, or you might need to bring in some Power BI to do that, and maybe you're doing your own sort of analysis on the fly that you're using Office 365, or you want to share it with your colleagues through Office 365. Again, we need to start thinking about what the business process is and how we're layering the basis of Dynamics, but how do we layer in these other technologies to really solve the business problem and for you guys. And I think what we're on a journey, and how we're reorganizing ourselves, is to go about doing this for you guys. Because I think we want to be able to show this is the industry focus, this is the vision that we have for your industry or or the vertical, and say we have a lot of the right pieces to come together, and we're going to help you guys pull them together. And you're going to start to see us do a better job of pulling the solutions together, and then we'll be working with our partners to do the same thing. It would be remiss if I didn't mention a little bit of some of the new things that are happening this year. You've heard a lot about, sorry, the change didn't happen. There's a lot of talk this week about what's happening with Dynamics AX. It's no longer called AX7, I apologize for that. The Dynamics AX. What I wanted to specifically talk about here, in addition to all the general great stuff that's happening with Dynamics AX, specifically for those of you who are experts on AX and how it relates to the project world, the main thing that's changing for us, and this one that's specifically related to us, is this notion of roles. If you're setting up a project in AX, we now have the ability to actually set up not just individuals, but roles in the system, so it allows you to be able to be a lot more flexible in how you do your planning as well as you do your reporting. So it's an important change that happened for that, and hopefully you guys got a chance to see it on the showroom floor, to see the AX solution, and to see some of the changes around that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was around an acquisition that we made this year that we think is very, very relevant to our industry, and that you may not have heard of. So has everybody heard of Field One? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So everyone's heard of it. Did everyone get a chance this week to go see it in the showroom? No? So I just wanted to take a minute or two to sort of highlight it, because I think it's only a couple months into it. We're just now getting into how we're going to pull it together and do the joint roadmaps, and how we're going to integrate it in with our CRM solution, which is going to happen. But I mean, it's an amazing product. So I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. So if we look at the customers on the side, whether or not we're talking about Safety Clean or whether we're talking Navco, these are all organizations within the service industry using Field One, right? So Field One has been around for 14 years. They are an enterprise field service management software application. So why do this? Why would somebody want to automate their field service process? Obviously, there are a number of key things, right? Optimizing travel time. If you're able to figure out how to do your field calls more efficiently, you can use your trucks and equipment less. Obviously, if you're doing it more efficiently, you can actually do more calls in the same amount of time. Your carbon footprint, the whole sort of environmental safety and environmental compliance issues is a key element of what these firms are having to deal with. And then lastly, the whole thing about being more efficient is you can be more predictive. You can actually, what's nice is, 5 years ago, if you had called your cable company and said I needed, installation or repair, they say we'd come this day. And then it came as we'll come within this 4-hour window. Now we'll tell you which 2-hour window we're coming in. I mean, it's very, very, from a customer's perspective, is amazing, right? That you now can say, I know within a 2-hour window when they're going to be there. Where before it was like 4 hours or 8 hours or, thank goodness they're going to come today or this week. We just didn't know when it is. And so this notion of how do we get more predictive, being more reliable, and being able to do that better is where these guys are going. And I think that, again, this is sort of more of a wrap up, but I think it sort of ties back a lot of the key pieces that I've talked about the rest of the day, is really Microsoft is not just one thing. It's how do we pull all of these things together to be able to provide solutions. And as great as Enterprise Field Services is from Field One, when you pair it with our customer service solution, our project services product, Office 365 for Skype and for Yammer, and tying it back to Dynamics AX and the Azure IoT platform. Again, we're starting to look at how we, how much more powerful the solution is as we tie it together. And it's important because, as we said as I said early on in the presentation, we're not seeing that people are doing field service over here and people are doing customer service over there and people doing project service over there. They're pulling all this together. And so the idea of how do we manage resources better across all those organizations? How do we manage the time and the effort along that? And so there's a lot of things that are common against that in terms of managing project time, resource time, and putting all that together that needs to be done on that. So with that, I'm going to attempt to actually formally ask for questions. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Oh.
How Microsoft going to help us? So some of us have those products, right? So some of us have those products and components of them, or we've got a couple. But how are Microsoft going to help us, pull all of that together into, a joined up system, a holistic system that works across the piece seamlessly? Is there something that you're doing, or is it about us taking those products and integrating them?
So to make sure we heard the question, because the sound was a little low.
Sorry.
The question is, if you have all of these products already, is it on the responsibility of the customer to pull it all together, or is it a partner, or is it going to be Microsoft?
Yeah, or a partner, or who,
Right. So I think the answer is, as we go forward, we're going to create roadmaps and sort of end-to-end solution roadmaps for this that says this is how we're going to do it, and that part of that is going to be done by Microsoft. And there will be things that I think that we'll start to see things like field service and customer service and project service. Those will come together quite soon. Okay. And then other pieces may take longer. And I think that you'll see the IoT pieces come in differently. And then we'll obviously layer in the partners. They will be critical to be able to do that. Yeah. And so how do we pull in that? And specifically, I think is the journey that, the reason I put him up here is this is sort of the vision, is that that's where we're going to go, and that we have to work over the next 6, 12, 18 months to figure out exactly how we're going to do that, which partners are going to come involved, and how we're going to do it. But at the end, in the near term, the next 6 months, it's going to be, we're going to have to work closely with partners to do that. I think in long term, we need to figure out a better vision for doing that and an exact plan for that.
Because I think, from my perspective, I think I empathise with most of the issues up there and can see the opportunity, but it's then about sort of translating it into actionable projects, initiatives to see the benefits and make it start happening, right? So at the moment I can kind of see that they're components and they're tools, and it's about sort of then how do we take that forward? I think that's the bit that I'm still a little bit hazy on.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, with that then, I will wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming today. I don't have to tell you about the other sessions because we're at the end of the convergence, so I hope you guys have a safe travel home to wherever it is. And if you have any questions, I'll be hanging out here, and if you want my contact information, we can continue the conversation next week as well. Thank you very much for coming, and have a great rest of convergence.